அனைவருக்கும் மாலை வணக்கம். இங்கே பல நாடுகளிலிருந்து பல ஊர்களிலிருந்து தொழிலதிபர்கள், வர்த்தகர்கள், வணிகர்கள், ஆண்டர்ப்ரனர்ஸ் எல்லாம் வந்திருக்க நேரத்தில் எனக்கு முதல் ஒரு கடமை இருக்கின்றது. சங்கம் வளர்த்த மதுரைக்கு 100 ஆண்டு காலமாக தமிழர்களுக்கு அடையாளம் கொடுத்த திராவிட இயக்கத்தின் 4வது தலைமுறை முன்னோடியாக அருள்மிகு மீனாட்சி சுந்தரேஸ்வரர் திருக்கோயிலுக்கு 60 ஆண்டுகளுக்கு பிறகு 1963இல் திருப்பணி செய்த, இங்கே அருகில் உள்ள காமராஜர் பல்கலைக்கழகத்துக்கு உருவாக்குற ஒரு மூல காரணமாக இருந்த தமிழவேல் PTR ராஜன் அவர்களின் பேரனாக மதுரைக்கு வைகை கரை சாலைகள், ரிங் ரோடு, மாட்டுத்தாவணி பஸ் நிலையம், மெட்ராஸ் உயர்நீதிமன்றத்தின் கிளை, பல பாலங்கள் ஆகிய உட்கட்டமைப்புகளை கொண்டு வந்த பண்பாளர் PTR பழனிவேல் ராஜனின் மகனாக இவற்றையெல்லாம் மீறி அன்னை மீனாட்சியினால் தமிழ்நாட்டு சட்டப்பேரவைக்கு ₹1 பணம் கொடுக்காமல் அனுப்பப்பட்ட உறுப்பினராக உங்கள் அனைவரையும் மனம் நிறைந்த மகிழ்ச்சியுடனும் பெரும் எதிர்பார்ப்புடனும் இங்கே வரவேற்கிறேன். The topic given to me today is Southern Possibilities. Now, Southern can mean many different things. I could look at this and say Southern, North India versus South India. I could look at Southern and say Northern Tamil Nadu versus Southern Tamil Nadu. I could look at Southern in the kind of developmental lingo and say the haves versus the have-nots, or the weaker compared to the stronger, the weaker being the South. In today's discussion, since I'm the only man speaking for my party, and I'm one of very few politicians speaking today, I don't want to focus on my city or my region. Rather, I want to focus on a philosophy of development and entrepreneurship, which I hope some of you will find resonates with you. This very important meeting, networking event, gathering of entrepreneurs across the Tamil diaspora across the world, comes at a very critical time for our state and our country. For those of you either in public service or those who look at developmental data or statistics, you will be aware that we are at a very dangerous point. What the rest of the world calls our demographic dividend, that is the great youth surge that still powers our economy and powers our demographic profile compared to, let's say, places like China or the West, or in extreme cases, rapidly aging countries like Japan. What people see as our demographic dividend is fast becoming a democratic threat or a democratic time bomb. And the single variable that converts a dividend to a threat is the lack of employment opportunity. We are in a country where roughly 12 million people enter the workforce every year by age progression. Additionally, the mechanization of agriculture plus the unviability or the non-viability of small-scale farming in the absence of credit as an aftermath of demonetization is driving about 3 to 4 million mid-career workers into the workforce, into the job-seeking population, and often from rural to urban areas. So we are at a situation where we have to create about 15 to 16 million jobs a year if we are going to get the benefit of the demographic dividend. Therefore, the consequent improvements in per capita GDP and consequently the improvement in the quality of life and the delivery of services that the government is supposed to provide, and politicians like me claim that that is our ambition to do. But in fact, the situation is extremely dire. A friend of mine posted two statistics online in the last couple of days. The first statistic: the average age of the murder accused in Tamil Nadu in the last 3 years is in the range of 18 to 26. The overwhelming majority of murder accused are in that age range, 18 to 26. That is also true for chain snatchers, mobile snatchers, etc. We are at the cusp of potentially a dangerous trend where we have educated, unemployed youth turning to criminal methods for progress. Another data point: about 3 days ago, the police department of Delhi put out an application for 706 constables. For those 706 posts, 7.6 lakh people applied. 10,000 people per post. Most of the applicants had at least one degree. Many of them had professional degrees, some had 2 degrees. I'll add one more statistic without politicizing it. In 2016, when the elections were over, there were 68 lakh people registered with the Employment Exchange in Tamil Nadu looking for work. Today, that number is north of 1 crore. So we have a serious problem. And this problem is not homogeneous across India. That is another twist to the problem. I say this without any kind of aspersions on different people, but I have to cite the statistics. India, as The Economist magazine once put it, is a continent masquerading as a country. We are so diverse historically, culturally, by language. And over the past 50, 60 years since independence, and particularly the last 25, 30 years since the liberalization regime, the divergence of states has been stark. I'll give you just 2 examples. At one end of the spectrum are states like Tamil Nadu. In Tamil Nadu, the average age today is 31 years old. The population is slightly above 50% female. It's almost a balanced sex ratio. The average education is a high school graduate. The per capita income is close to 2 lakh rupees. This is per capita dividing across men, women, children. And the gross enrollment ratio for higher education, that is, the percentage of all college eligible age children entering college, is 46%. By far the number one statistic in the country. The average is 23%. The next highest state is Kerala in the 30s. Contrast this to Bihar. In Bihar, the average age is 19. It is a 52% male population. The average education is elementary school dropout. The per capita income is roughly 42, 43,000 rupees. And the enrollment ratio of college age children entering college or joining college is 12%, 1/4 of Tamil Nadu's. Now, a few months ago, I appeared on behalf of the DMK in front of the 15th Finance Commission that was on tour across the country taking inputs. As you may know, the 15th Finance Commission is the one that decides how tax revenues collected by the Government of India, which equate to something about, by the time the Commission's work is done, something about 20 lakh crores a year through direct and indirect taxes, how this tax revenue is split between the central government and the states as a whole, and then across the states from one state to another. Now, the principles of federalism suggest that developed states like ours will put in a lot and get back a little, and underdeveloped states like Bihar will put in very little and get back a lot. That's the nature of federalism, no problem. Where the problem arises is that having done this kind of skew of taking from the haves and giving to the less well-off for the last 25 years. So, Tamil Nadu's allocation of the state tax revenues in 1994 was 6.75%. Then it dropped to 6 point something percent, then 5 point something percent, then 4 point something percent. The 14th Finance Commission gave us 4.06%. This time, if they follow the same logic, we'll get something with a 3 handle, 3.578. And yet, we pay somewhere north of 8, maybe up to 10% of all taxes collected in India. So, in that context, I was having a different discussion about the nature of efficiency and equity as they claim their principles were. But in this context, I want to ask you something else. You're all entrepreneurs. How is it that within the same country, we have such great disparity? After all, we're a federal country. In theory, there's freedom of movement of labor, goods, capital, data, anything. And yet we have such disparate states. I would postulate that what we have learned from the experience of India across various states and Africa over the last 50, 60 years of so-called developmental policies compared to the last 10 years of Chinese investment, that some places are just not capable of growing beyond a certain rate. If you don't have the infrastructure for growth, if you have not thought about the principles of how your society should be run, you end up being unable to force funds and revenue and money through the system to actually generate growth and improve quality of life. In our case, in Tamil Nadu, we have been very fortunate. Going back to 1916, the Justice Party, the 1920 government, and continuing for the bulk of the last 100 years, the Dravidian movement has had 2 or 3 basic principles. One is social justice. Second is the importance of education. Now, I'm not saying this philosophically. I'm going to give you laws, geos, systems that have been implemented. And the third is the importance of private enterprise and the fact that the government cannot do everything. So, if you look at the original legislation under diarchy by the Justice Party government between 1920 and 1926 alone, in just 6 years, the pioneering legislation included, for the first time in India and before London, the right for women to vote in elections. First time in India. It included a compulsory education scheme for boys and girls in elementary education in 1920. I'm not talking about now, I'm talking 1920. It included the communal GO that said jobs should be made available through the proportion of the population that different castes are and different communities are. They cannot be monopolized by the few. It included social reform like the nationalization of temples. It included the removal of Sanskrit as a prerequisite for studying medicine. These are the kinds of reforms that happened. I'm talking back to 1920. What does this mean in today's world? Let us set aside the history for a second. Let's look all around the world. The single greatest economic problem the world is facing today is disparity in outcomes, is increasing Gini coefficients. The haves are getting much better off and the have-nots are falling far behind. This is true in America, where it fueled the rise of the Tea Party movement and the presidency of Donald Trump. It's true in Europe, where the far right has started to push anti-trade, anti-globalization, anti-immigration policies. It is happening in China, where unrest. The Chinese government spends more money maintaining social order, as they call it, than on defense. Think about that. They spend more money on policing and maintaining social order than they spend in the entire defense budget, which is the largest in the world already. Now, the difference with this problem, and this problem is driven by many common factors, the largest of which is globalization. Anybody who has studied either macroeconomics or free trade or econometrics, who can model the consequences of trade, knows that globalization will certainly increase the total revenue pie. It will also increase disparity unless concrete measures are taken by governments, by agencies, by individuals to ensure that that doesn't happen. I lived for 20 years in America. The average wage of a manufacturing employee in 1980 was high enough that they could buy a house, a holiday home, a boat, and in some cases in the defense industry where I used to be a consultant, a small private plane. Today, manufacturing jobs are disappearing, and those manufacturing jobs that remain are paying much, much less. When I went to the US in the 1980s, a bond trader would make maybe $300,000-400,000 a year. When I left the US in 2008, my highest paid colleague in Lehman Brothers made $48 million in compensation in 1 year. This is what globalization does. So, in the case of India, we have this double whammy, that this discrepancy, this natural separation of the haves and have-nots, this increasing inequality is coming at a very early stage in our development. We have not reached middle income. We are not even China's status. We are certainly not Singapore's or America's status. We are a country at roughly $2,000 per capita income. And already we can see the spread between UP or Bihar and Tamil Nadu. We can see the spread between Kanjipuram, Sri Perumbudur, Chennai, Tiruvallur, and let's say Tirunelveli, Kanyakumari, Madurai, Theni. This, if it is not arrested by conscious policy, if it is not arrested by conscious investment from people like you, this problem cannot be solved any other way. This problem is only one directional. The global model tells us that. We had this great luxury, if I wind the clock back to 1920, of a very unique political situation. The Justice Party consisted almost exclusively of the non-Brahmin elites. It consists of people who were large landholders. In those days, that was about the only way to be really well off. The British didn't allow a lot of industrial development in India. They wanted the value-adding manufacturing industries to stay back in the home country so they could steal the raw materials from here, make the wealth there, and then sell us back the finished goods. But it was mostly men, and almost all of them were highly educated and on the top of the pyramid. So they were Oxbridge, Inns of Court barristers, doctors, accountants, professionals who were many of them British trained, and certainly all of them seriously landed people. It was a unique gift to our society that such top of the pyramid people, such 1% people, chose to focus their politics on leveling the pyramid and raising the 99%. That is the single reason why Tamil Nadu is where it is today, and those policies were continued from the 1920s through various governments. Though the principles got diluted, though the nature of politics became much more self-serving, though many of the people in politics today are not sitting at the top of the pyramid, they're looking from the bottom and see politics as a way to go up. The foundation, the blocks of our progress, at least relative to the rest of our country, were laid then based on the 1%, those at the top of the pyramid, then developing policies for the bottom of the pyramid. Unfortunately for us, we have two problems in India today that show the erosion of these values. Leave politics aside, because if I start talking, you'll start thinking about partisan politics. I say this without aspersion to party A or B or C. I just say generally the quality of politics is deteriorated. Beyond the quality of politics, we have two basic problems. My senior from MIT, Rajan, wrote a book with a fellow professor from Chicago, Luigi Zingales, called Saving Capitalism from the Capitalists. That is, in other words, the problem with capitalism is once a few reach the top of the pyramid, they figure out a way to subvert or corrupt the democratic system through lobbying, through legal or illegal means, and make sure that they draw bridges behind them so that nobody can touch them, and they leave the rest of the people behind and start exponentially climbing to the top. India is the classic case study of that. If you look at one of our biggest problems today, there is almost zero bank credit available because the NPAs of banks, both public and private, have exploded. But who have these bank loans been taken by? The lakhs of farmers together cannot account for more than 10 or 15% of the total NPAs of the banks. The top 5 borrowers account for something like 35% of the NPAs of the top 10 banks. Five groups. So you have crony capitalism at its worst mixed with kind of lazy and corrupt socialism. Because if the banks had not been nationalized, maybe this would not be the problem. But here you have the worst cases of crony capitalism and corrupt and lazy socialism, and we have a huge problem at the bank level. But at some other level, all of us here are the 1% of the world. Many of us are actually the 0.1% or the 0.01%. And while I am the furthest thing from a communist or a socialist or a big government guy, it occurs to me that we all, in the way we think, in the way we act, need to fundamentally get a different view. We need to be southern focused, or the lesser sections of society focused, not for altruism. You know, I'm an ex-investment banker. I can hardly claim to be kind of altruistic. But I will say, as Gordon Gekko said memorably on Wall Street, yes, greed is good. As Adam Smith said, each man acting in his own self-interest gives us the greatest outcome, no doubt. But as they said on Wall Street, be long-term greedy. Don't be short-term greedy. Think about ways that we can draw development down to the people in job creation, in multiplier effects and so forth. So, let me just conclude my statements by saying two things. While I believe that we must encourage multinational companies and big investments of hundreds and thousands of crores, I don't think that is the answer to our solution. Our solution needs a fundamentally different government policy approach that enables entrepreneurs at the 10 crore level, 100 crore level, 500 crore level, 1000 crore level to do their jobs better and to do it in a way that is inclusive, as the Justice Party government said, inclusive in growth, inclusive in opportunity, inclusive in education, inclusive in training, in skill development. In every level of our society, this lack of inclusiveness is clear. I don't have the time, so I won't go into too many examples. But if you look around you, you look from civic amenities like roads being hijacked by big shops and hotels and hospitals who create their own parking lots on the main road and don't pay 1 rupee in extra taxes for it. You look at big corporations that corner contracts. You look at the lack of transparency in tenders. Now, in any democracy, you cannot separate money and politics, so I'm not naive. But surely there has to be a better system than the system we have now. And as much as people like me will change the government system, I know that that cannot be the solution. The solution has to be people like you. People like you acting in their own self-interest, but with an enlightened and long-term focus and an inclusive view of the world. So, let me conclude by saying that as many southern possibilities as they are, they can only be turned into realities by entrepreneurs like you. I urge you to join me. I can do my part in policy, you do your part in enterprise, and let's look to make the southern-northern divide smaller and eventually eliminated. Thank you for the time, ladies and gentlemen.